So, hello everyone. It's almost everyone was on the last week's call, but welcome Gabor as well for the European meeting. So last week we discussed, it was the first meeting that was held together with the default content and the new team issue. And what we discussed last week was that we will start creating a little bit of kind of physical ideas, like a way to visualize what are we planning to be doing, so that product management could get a little bit of better idea of like what are we planning to do. Also, we thought it would be easier for them to sign off on this in case it was difficult for them to think about like how would it look like before we had created any like visualization. So for that reason, we are creating maybe a little bit of like some images and maybe a little bit of writing down of other ideas that we've had. So Keith, do you want to talk about that?
I'm really sorry that my Ethernet cable wasn't connected, so I actually dropped off for everything you've just said, Larry. I do apologize.
Okay, that's okay.
What do you need me to dive into? Is it where we left off?
So I basically just explained that what we discussed last week. And yeah. I also say that you say that you might have, I think he dropped off again. Hello, Keith, can you hear me?
Yeah, just back now.
Okay.
I don't know why that's flaky. I'm in the office. It should be good, apart from when your Ethernet cable is not connected.
It's okay. I will just to pay some attention that if you get lost, because I don't get any like sound effects that I usually do get. So,
sure.
So I was just saying that I explained what we talked about last week, just very briefly, yes. That we want to create a little bit of like visualization of like what is our idea from like multiple different ideas, so that the product management could more easily like sign off on our ideas.
Yep, absolutely.
And you said that you might have some time to work on this.
Yep. Yeah, we've done that. I was thinking I had this hour to sort of wrap it up into some presentable kind of PDF or something, but I can share what we've done, no problem. Did you go into the fact that we discussed the scenario conversation as well around the fact that it would be good to sort of play with the ideas themselves as well a bit, because there was question marks around the farmers market as scenario, and we talked about possibly playing around with publication as well, publishing.
Yep. So there's also the doc, which I will repost on the channel.
Yes.
Things to demo. Which has a nice list of ideas, things to demo out of the box on Drupal.
Yeah, and it's absolutely the case as I've been putting these some sketches together. So what have we been doing, just to recap, is just to sketch how this might look, absolutely not to be considered a final design. Just what might this look like, how might it make sense as a scenario, how useful might it be, and how far-reaching could it be in terms of demonstrating Drupal core and providing some level of onboarding experience. And I can say certainly in relation to that document, Larry, I've got plenty I can pop into there, because ideas have sort of been filling into my head as I've been doing these sketches. So I think the best thing would be to just share the sketch in some way that I've been working on. There's two.
Can you share your screen maybe?
We could do, or I can just upload the JPEGs to the Slack as well. It depends what what you'd prefer. But let me just get the
I guess
two
it
visuals.
would be a better idea just to share the screen and the display here, because otherwise maybe everybody would start to give their opinion on something that they don't know what we are talking about.
Yeah, I think I understand exactly what you mean. That's fine. Can you just give me a moment? Because what I'll do is I'll open them in preview. As I say, I was going to pop them into a sort of
that's fine.
PDF.
It's great that you've got some time to work on this, because of
No
I
problem
think
at all.
actually after like thinking a little bit more, because before last week's meeting I didn't really think much about like creating any visualization, because I was very afraid that it will take a lot of time from us and it will be like causing a lot of burnout. But after we discussed that last week, I had a little bit of better feeling about that we can just create like a quick sketch and to visualize. And I actually, after that, I thought it will be very helpful, because I thought like if I would be in that situation, it would be way easier for me to sign off after I've seen like something visualized or something physical.
Yeah, I understand.
Also about the list that we made on that document, I think it would be really useful to add to each point the importance that it might have for explaining Drupal. I mean, for example, entity references is not as important as the login form. For example, I mean, just adding it some weight or something similar, you know, to put the most important ones at the beginning and focus on them.
This one is, I think this one is a prioritized list, but this is not like approved by anyone. This is just like anyone could edit this file. So it is just kind of a prioritized list. I think it makes sense, like maybe not one by one, but like if you look at content creation versus breadcrumbs, I think content creation is more important, definitely. Or if you look at views block or content creation or comments, I think it makes sense that comments are more important. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be nice to also get feedback on this from the product management, because I think they would have an idea which ones are the features that we actually want to demonstrate the most, like which gives us the edge against others.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well,
and there's so much you can do with Core.
Those designs are really nice.
So, can everybody see the screen?
Yeah, I can now. I will actually present to everyone, so now everyone can see our screen.
Okay, great. So, just a bit of background. Do you want me to just step through these now, or do you want to hold back for a moment?
Yeah, this one looks really nice, actually.
So we were playing around with content over in the example content project when the farmers market tutorial was the focus of the project, effectively. So we were thinking about how do we create content that will work with a real world scenario of a farmer's market. And it just so happens that certainly for us here in Hampshire, there's lots of farmers markets nearly every single weekend. There's actually a bit of a kind of farmers market association. And so that they go to each of the towns. There's some very picturesque towns. So we were thinking about how can we play with real world photography. So I went out one Sunday morning and just took some shots in Winchester, which is just down the way. And we were just to do something to actually get a bit of a mood board going. So you may or may not have seen the mood board that was previously produced. And it was just before the product team sort of were giving their feedback on what they were kind of hoping for from the project in terms of overall goals. So we were really just sketching. But I thought it would be really helpful to actually lay out the content just to see if the homegrown content would really work in this scenario. I also wanted to have a think about how much the design would become very much intrinsically part of the scenario, because there had been early conversations about the potential for the theme to be refactorable in some way. Now I know that in the last meeting we agreed that's out of scope, But it's always been in my mind about whether or not that has to be intrinsically linked or part of the design or not, because obviously, and I think it was Christina that said in one of these new theme meetings that you're going to get a more convincing experience if you actually do design around the topic as almost as a brand for the scenario, and I think that's right. So we just grabbed you can see we just grabbed the Anytown name of the tutorial and just put a logo against that just to get a feel. So obviously it would have been necessary to come up with an appropriate name for the sake of the brand. And we were just playing around with content. So these two designs, so we've actually got a sketch that I can't share right now because it's actually being worked on right now. So I thought the meeting was at 3, where we're actually sort of working on this to be a little bit less derivative from some of the other designs that we were looking at in the mood board, because we were just trying to, as I say, this was just a sketch to get a feel for how this would work. But I mean, we're not doing anything that's out of the ordinary here. As you can see, it's the typical kind of masonry style presentation of content. Cards are featuring quite heavily. I was thinking about how can you work with Drupal core to refactor content so that you can present it in a really really nice way that's manageable all from core. So the idea of using view modes, I guess, and image styles, and just nice selection of fonts, and the way that we treat the typography, just being really balanced and on grid, if you like. Also, we've got the opportunity here to hand draw graphics, because obviously we were talking about how graphically we need this to be ideally all content that effectively can be owned by the theme, by the project, and under that license, rather than obviously having to sub-license anything or any of those awkwardnesses. So we were thinking about how we could hand draw some graphics. So these were dropped in, these are stock, but there's nothing stopping us drawing up some graphics like this sort of thing to get that feel. And you can see the theme is really, when you start talking about background images of wood being on a region or a block or however that might be done, the theme really is inheriting, the theme is delivering a good chunk of the design, if you like. In that sense, it becomes much harder to imagine it being spun off into something else. But yeah, this is where we got to. So do chip in if you've got anything you wanted to ask or comment on. But there is also, I might as well just carry on stepping through them. So
I actually have one question at this point.
Yeah.
You already mentioned the licensing. Is there so the typography you are using, is that also under some license, or is it something we could potentially include in Drupal?
I don't know the intricacies of what rules might exist from Drupal's perspective, from those governing the whole kind of licensing aspect for Drupal as a product. I'm presuming that so long as we are creating content, whether it's photography or whether it's hand-drawn items such as these, they're effectively that's content we're creating, and is as such the copyright can be passed appropriately into the license. So effectively, it just becomes the completely open source and available under an open source license, as opposed to going to a library.
I meant the font. The fonts that I've been.
Yeah, these are Google fonts, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So these are Google fonts.
Yeah, we need to figure out if that's something we can use.
I'm not sure, but I think that Google fonts, fonts that are Google, I think are really close or exactly what we need. But anyway, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of free and copyright friendly for Drupal.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the fonts that are on Google, and at least some of them are open source. I don't know if all of them are, but
okay. I think from memory there was a thread. I'm sure I looked at this last year, but I'm sure I read an old thread where Open Sans was being discussed as being used in Drupal core in some way. And I think that there was a requirement that the font needed to be released under the specific, is it GPL license? I could be, off track here, and I think that caused some problems. So yes. I don't know if there needs to be some level of change, or whether or not we're going to need to have a conversation about this early on, because this is going to be a huge factor in creating a convincing theme.
Yeah. So I just checked. All of the Google fonts are open source, but I don't know which design are they under.
Does it? How does it affect if you're linking to it rather than obviously you're not embedding it, are you? You're not including the actual font into the theme.
I'm not expert in licensing, so to be honest, I don't know how that affects. We will need to ask the people who.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
It's open font license that they are using.
Okay.
Yeah, and most of the fonts that I've used, they usually have a GitHub repo or something similar. So I guess it should be suitable, but anyway, at the end, the designer will decide together with what you were saying about the license.
Sure. Yeah.
So there is I was just looking at this a little bit more. So Drupal is licensed under TPL, and there is like a GPL font clause, font exception clause, but I'm quite sure there's, I don't know, we need to go that through with the people who know more about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But there is some stuff related to this available online.
I guess ideally it will become a limiting factor rather than a blocker. I mean, ideally it wouldn't be a limiting factor at all, but from a design perspective, we want to be working with some nice fonts and not falling back to Helvetica Arial or Serif.
Yeah,
I think if we are relying on some remote font service, that may be working around GPL anyway, but I'm not a lawyer either, so I think it needs to be verified.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's proceed. Let's discuss fonts later.
Yep. So the main thing I'm sort of hoping that the designs will do is obviously convince on two levels. They'll convince on the level of that we can do something that's going to look really nice, that we can own the content, so therefore we can make sure the content's released fully open source, but also that the actual approach demonstrates common patterns that you would, as a site builder or as someone considering Drupal, want to see, understand, delve into a bit perhaps, but also just that whole thing of this is just core. We need to make a big deal of that. And I'm not sort of, at the moment, I haven't dived into thinking about how we present kind of this is just this is just core part of it. I think the main thing first is just to agree. It's a bit like that shared doc. We need to agree what main features we want to show off and design around those. But if you look at the navigation, you can see, well, even from the top, we've got the typical, core search. We've got the fact that we can have generic type content, which is naturally going to have a number of content types, probably a number of relationships, number of views, especially around our vendors. There was already a content model built up for this, as I understand it, that I think someone on the example project was working on, Laralan, and the idea was just to really show that we care about content architecture, and having a really good kind of experience around that whole field to content relationship, I guess. And that applies really well to recipes. So I think the idea was to give examples around recipes. And then you've got the more kind of general type of content that you'd see on any site typical site, news, contact us, that sort of thing. I guess we can be demonstrating forms through contact us. So it's that kind of making sure that we're covering, by implication at the moment, because we've only done homepage sketches, what types of things can be demonstrated with these. But I think it'd be really valuable to extend this work into just really lightweight wireframes before we present too much, just how other areas of the site would demonstrate those features. That was one of the things that I was hoping to sort of start sketching out for today, to have at least one of those ready to show and how we could present that. Because I think it's important that we get our message across easily to those that need to sort of understand what we're trying to do here quite quickly. So what we did, should I carry on? Everybody okay with me just carrying on?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in this second design, I was just playing around with, we were just doing different approaches really. How could we make the theme itself become even more part of the content? So you can see here where we've taken a different approach with the banner area, but you can see that if you're imagining theming this, we really are bringing in, this isn't going to be an image that someone's uploaded. This is going to be the theme starting to influence how a promoted piece of content is actually being presented. So again, it's thinking about that balance between keeping the theme very, very universal and generic, versus actually we're really starting to bake in the tone and the feel, the look and feel of the subject matter into the design. So we've got more wood appearing for a feature that also is obviously showing off probably some views exposed filter. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just a variation on the theme. So that was the work we did before Christmas. And then in our last meeting, we had a chat about whether publishing would be an interesting scenario to consider as well. It's obviously, I think Kevin used the word parochial to describe the farmers market. And obviously, from the product management perspective, there's been sort of the points raised around, is the farmers market as a scenario something that those considering Drupal are going to immediately relate to, versus also what types of site is Drupal quite often used for. And publishing, magazine, that type of thing is obviously a very it's a very sort of frequent use case that you see for that more ambitious type of project. I think also that as I've been playing around with sketching this out, that you can also see that the publishing angle certainly introduces potentially more complicated presentations of content, which could be really quite enjoyable to delve into, to show Drupal's capability, just simply because there's probably more that you can spin into this. So the idea with this particular sketch that we've been working on is basically that we've got a food magazine. So we discussed last week about how over here we've got the BBC Good Food, and it's a magazine, it's a physical magazine published every month. And it's accompanied with a website where there are recipes, and there's a bit of a community, and you've got ratings and you've got comments, and it's kind of just taking a little bit of a lead from there. It's a Drupal site as well. So that's what we're sort of mapping out here, this whole idea of there being a magazine, a publisher releasing a magazine. So I'm literally just playing with names at the moment. These are, as I say, we're sketching this. None of this is final. So if there's anything that is really disliked, please do offer suggestions, and we can start baking those in. But basically, the idea is also just playing with logos, getting a brand feel, just something that's as convincing as possible. And the idea with this is that there is a publisher behind this as well. So there was certainly one of the points raised was about how the content, how ideally the content also needs to relate to the everyday. So you might have more sort of basic pages like About Us or the team. So that's something I'm sort of covering in this example as well, as we'll scroll down and we'll see this. So we are demonstrating the idea of encouraging login and promoted content. We could do a simple carousel, all using core, basically come up with ways, rather than obviously using modules, come up with ways to do these types of things at a theme level. One really important thing just to say before I scroll down as well further is that the idea with this theme is I'm trying to get all of the design energy into the content rather than the theme. So that if it ever did become the case that we wanted to spin this into something else in the future, the structure is there, kind of the ability to create content, to present content in cards or in rows. It's all there from a sort of perspective of it's been kept much more generic. I hope that makes sense. So you can see here that we've gone for the idea of sort of, we would mock up, if we went down this route, we would mock up an actual magazine. In fact, this is just a template example here, where we've just dropped in the logo. But we would actually go to the extent of fully mocking this up as a magazine, so that we get that sense of it being real, and again that sort of design presentation style coming from the content rather than just the theme, or mainly from the content rather than the theme. So we can have, again, promoted articles, can think about how these cards work, but you could imagine this being spun into a number of different other ideas if it needed to be. So I'm having trouble scrolling for some reason. Strange. Can you see my screen jittering? So we've got no cover image, but it's the idea of subscription. So I guess this is a good example where we could be playing with forms or some kind of login registration, showing off how you could get different types of roles built up in Drupal, something that Core's great at, obviously. And here we're actually surfacing that user submitted content. So I think we could even do sort of a demo of ratings done on the cheap, if you like, without a module, just by having I thought you maybe could have a user submit, an example of a user submitted recipe where the rating is maybe just a select list 1 to 5, and we just use that to theme out the stars. And down the bottom here, down the bottom here. So the idea here is that we're introducing the actual publisher. So I think we'll probably use a logo. If we were to do this, you'd use a logo that didn't, you'd use a font on the logo that didn't look quite so similar to the actual publication. So this is that whole area of kind of a more typical use of that, the team, the contact us, sorry, the team, the about us, the general sorts of pages. That can be surfaced as well. Taxonomy, a really important thing to be showing off. So the idea that you could actually relate content and build some views around that. And also thinking about maybe how the footer down the bottom here could be used to actually provide content within the example content and theme itself to explain what's going on to some level. Obviously not to the tutorial level, because it's agreed that we're not building a tutorial here, but just to explain to some degree what's going on, and those sorts of links could live in the footer down here. So that's really as far as I've got, just sketching, and I hope it's helpful.
Sure.
Yeah,
I feel talked out. That's it.
Yeah, this one looks really nice as well. And also what you said, like, I think all of it makes a lot of sense for me. Like, it's pretty much what we discussed, and you've come up with great ideas.
Yeah.
What I think we should do with this is that I agree with the wireframes. That it might make sense to make a few wireframes to show a couple of more ideas that we have, probably of the recipes page and some of the other things that they requested on the call. But I think once we have that, it would make sense to probably have a call with them and do a similar kind of presentation for them and explain this tool. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. This is really amazing. Heads off. It's very cool. I did not expect us to be so far ahead at this point. So really great work. And also going to +1 that we should bring this back to leadership once we have a couple more pages built out. I'm not entirely convinced that the similar kind of content / approaches would not be feasible for farmers markets, because like there could be like there's vendors around farmers market, and there could be like the association organizing the farmers market for the about page or whatever. How do you get on that? How do you get a table at the market, etc.? That kind of information for possible vendors and that kind of stuff. So I'm not convinced that there's that big of a gap in terms of what we are demonstrating here or there. Or what we could demonstrate here or there. But yeah, I think either works personally.
I think it's a valid point. I think it's probably, I think when it comes down to it, it's probably more about the topic. You know, it's how do you want to present?
Yeah.
How do we want to present Drupal as a, you know, it's that whole kind of brand thing, isn't it? Really, and from a Drupal perspective, is farmers market the right topic versus something more, I guess, professional? Doesn't seem right. I mean, you can have a professionals farmers market, but you get where I'm coming from. It's business versus no, even that's not right.
I understand that it's easier to relate to this this type of website than the farmers market.
I think the farmers market, the 2 pages for farmers market are enough on farmers market, and then so I don't think we need to put any more energy there. But I think they do a very good job of highlighting a lot of possibilities that leadership may not have thought about that we are looking at. So I think these would be useful to show all at once and then let them provide feedback.
So one point I'd like to make, if I could, is just probably the biggest thing would be, I could imagine it being simpler to spin a theme like this one, like the publishing one, into something else. Then obviously to make the farmers market more convincing, we've gone down the route of it needing to look much more like the theme is delivering more of the design. We did actually play with a design where we didn't do that, and it really wasn't convincing. We took something quite similar to the in style to the WordPress coffee shop approach, where it really was just flat, lots of flat white, you know, stark text on there and just images, and it just, you know, so it was very generic an approach, but it wasn't convincing in terms of relating to farmers market.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's exactly the idea on visual stuff. Farmers market, I think, it's really far away from Drupal.
So just one extra idea. So maybe if we could get like a few more views that we could show, maybe not necessarily, it doesn't have to be necessarily even a design. Maybe just a wireframe would be enough of that. But I think besides that, it might be useful to show a little bit of the Drupal components on this, because like that's a major part of these designs always, that it looks good on Drupal. So that like if we add a toolbar, if we add quick edit, that it still looks great.
Yeah.
And it can be just like a couple of examples where it looks nice, that it works with the design.
I think we are jumping. We are just missing some steps, jumping directly to wireframes or visual design, because I think we should invest our efforts on, for example, illustrating the most important parts. For example, if we are saying content creation, I mean, it's not the same than investing the time on designing a homepage where there are a lot of other stuff apart from the form itself.
Yeah, I agree that once we get the plan and idea approved, we will need to go back a few steps on the process. Okay. But I think it's important to work on these things to get this idea sold and get like the full approval. On that, what you are working on is great, and then we can like give a little bit more thought for what's
Okay.
behind of this.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Okay.
it makes sense to create after this, start creating more wireframes and give more thoughts for this. But if we do everything at this point with that process, it will take very long
Yeah,
us.
you're right.
to go there. And like it's a very heavy process for us for ideation.
Yeah.
So on this kind of like an ideation phase, we should go as light as possible. And then once we have even like our ideas, like let's say if after that we get approval that farmers market it is, or if it's the magazines, the publisher example we want to go, and then we will put all of our effort into designing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because at this point we are still like on an edge which of the
Yeah,
ideas
yeah,
we do.
you're
So we
right.
shouldn't like fully design 2 of these.
Yeah. And that's what I was stressing earlier about the farmers market visuals. Not so much the second one, but the first one was very much influenced by what we were seeing in the mood board, just to get a feel for. It was more we were focusing on what types of things we'd be thinking about from that Drupal conversation perspective. You know, what can Drupal core do, and what are we trying to show off? So in that sense, they are lightweight. I am speeding through these, so happy to continue and keep it lightweight.
And that's for this at this moment. That's I think that's the best thing to do. But once we have the full approval, then we can go few steps backwards. We, of course, everything we've done is something that we can still use as a material for that. Like we don't have to throw away anything. I don't think it's like that. But I think we just need to give a little bit of more planning, and then we can see which bits we can take from what we were doing earlier. So we have 3 minutes time, 3 minutes of time officially. Should we try to book a meeting with the product management? I don't know, Gabor, do you know when they would be available for a call?
I don't think that's I mean, there's several people involved, so I don't think that's a question I can answer right now.
Oh, so they're like, because last time it was like there was a specific slot where they kind of asked us.
Yeah, I think it's likely this. I think it's likely the same slot, probably, but I'm not sure. So I think we should just follow on the email that we originally had organizing that one, and that has the right people.
Yep.
And we can ask for another slot.
Okay, I will send email for them that we have prepared some things that, and we wanted we would like to show them for them.
Sure.
Yep, I could use a week ideally, if just to sort of spin up some wireframes. But if it's less, just give me just have a couple of days notice. Would be really great just to get the wireframes ready.
I'm pretty sure that you will have time.
Okay.
To do that, and it's not usually like that. It would happen in a couple of days. It's probably 1 to 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
That's how it's usually like.
Okay.
So I will send email, and thanks, Keith, for your amazing work. I'm very happy to see your ideas because they look great, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you.
And I think this will be a huge help for us selling this idea forward.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for showing up. Next week is the time slot that is better for the US. But if you will show up, see you next week. Otherwise, see you in 2 weeks. Or if we have a meeting with the product management before that, you might have a meeting then beforehand.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.